A wealthy young woman, after financially supporting her ex-husband and his family for years, finally put her foot down. The family, enraged at this act, began to plot against her, leading to one of the most horrific crime scene discoveries in recent memory. Hong Kong is normally one of the safest metropolitan areas in the world. It actually has a remarkably low crime rate for such a big city. Naturally though, the place isn't perfect, as no place is. Until recently, when people thought of Hong Kong crimes, they mainly thought back to the horrific Hello Kitty murder case. Well, unfortunately, now the country has another internationally known case of horror under their belt. This is the story of Abby Choi, a story that took the internet by storm when the horrific details of the case came to light. Abby Choi Tin Fung was born in an ordinary family on the 15th of July in 1994, the youngest of 4 daughters. At some point after she was born, her mother divorced her biological father and married her stepfather, with whom she had 2 more children, giving Abby 2 younger half-sisters. Abby's mom later made quite a chunk of change by acquiring a few construction and mining businesses in mainland China. In addition to these, her mother owned multiple high-dollar properties along with various other multi-million-dollar assets. While most of her family was somewhat secretive, Abby decided to go in a different direction. In June of 2012, when Abby turned 20 years old, she decided to get an Instagram account. She started off this account by showing off various handbags and expensive articles of clothing, often with price tags in the thousands of dollars. With her good looks and her expensive taste, she quickly gained traction and an audience started to form. With the audience came invitations to parties and high-class social events. Before too long, Abby had become what you could call a socialite. It wasn't too long before she started meeting famous celebrities and her influence started growing exponentially. She became a self-proclaimed fashionista and many well-known brands started to take notice of her. Many of them even came out to sponsor her. When Abby was still very young, at age 18, she had married a man named Alex Kwong. Alex was a man from money himself. His father had founded a company called Ramjai Yunnan Mixian, which was a well-known chain of casual restaurants throughout Hong Kong. The two went on to have 2 children together. Unfortunately, their marriage would only go on to last 3 years, ending in a divorce. Abby, though, had grown very close with Alex's family over time. Perhaps after divorcing Alex, she felt some sort of responsibility towards his family. Maybe she just wanted her kids to maintain a high standard of living no matter where they were. Either way, she decided to continue buying lavish gifts for Alex's family, even going as far as buying them a large luxury apartment in one of Hong Kong's most expensive neighborhoods, a place worth well over $8 million. At some point after her divorce, Abby got into another relationship and remarried, this time with a man named Chris Tam. Chris was a wealthy businessman in Hong Kong. After not too long, Abby had an additional 2 more children with him. It seems that all 4 of the kids got along very well. As Abby and Chris were both very busy, they never did have the time to register their marriage with the government. They did have a large ceremony in 2016, but they never did get around to filing the papers. Time passed. Abby's 2 sons were now aged 10 and 3, her daughters were aged 8 and 6. Alex was the father of the older 2, while Chris was the father of the younger 2. Despite having divorced Alex quite some time ago, Abby was still supporting both him and his parents. Contrary to how most people might feel in these circumstances, Abby still held her ex's family in quite high regard. In fact, she referred to Alex's brother, Anthony Kwong, as her own brother as well. She really felt bad for Anthony given that he had been chronically unemployed. So she decided to hire him as her own personal driver, a task which she paid him for very handsomely. Not only that, but the 2 even opened a small pancake restaurant together. It's thought that this endeavor also made the 2 quite a nice bit of cash. Abby had only grown more and more popular on social media amongst her fans. She started regularly attending Paris Fashion Week and went on to be featured in several magazines like Elle, Harper's Bazaar, and Vogue. Abby cultivated more than 100,000 followers on Instagram over time. Abby engaged in all sorts of philanthropy. She didn't stick to Instagram, though, diversifying all her assets all over the place. She even co-founded an organization called Palmei's Charitable, which was a group that helped stray animals. This wasn't anywhere near her most profitable gig, though. Abby was a smart investor who profited greatly from investing in city parking lots, luxury handbags, and perhaps most of all, expensive watches. She would trade watches worth millions of dollars each, selling them whenever the prices would go up. Abby amassed a personal net worth of over 100 million Hong Kong dollars, roughly 13 million US dollars. The last time Abby would go on to be featured in a magazine was when she posed for the cover of a lifestyle magazine called L'Officiel Monaco. This issue praised her as a fashion icon and a trendsetter. Her last post on Instagram would go on to show this cover, with Abby saying, "From Hong Kong to the cover of L'Officiel Monaco, my journey as a style icon continues. Grateful for the recognition and continued support along the way." Abby's relationship with her ex-husband's family had just recently started going downhill. By now, Alex and his family had been living off of her for well over 6 years. It appeared that Abby, over time, getting a little wiser with her years, started realizing that she was being taken advantage of. She started to realize that she hadn't always been paying their way out of her own volition. In fact, she had been heavily coerced by her ex-father-in-law into buying that luxury apartment for them. Abby's ex-father-in-law, Cao Kuang, was formerly a police officer. He was, at one time, well respected. That was until he was accused of sexually assaulting a woman and lost his career. It was never proven whether or not the accusations were credible, but it appears they were, as Cao never contested them and willingly resigned from his job. Because he decided to leave, he was never arrested and the case was swept under the rug. Alex himself was no stranger to crime either. He tended to deal with more financial-related schemes, though. At some point, he started an investment scam that he perpetuated over dating apps. He would scam men into buying large amounts of gold from him. He had also been accused of stealing all manner of luxury items from people he knew, such as jewelry and watches. Not only that, but Alex had gotten himself into a mountain of debt with his irresponsible spending habits. It got to the point where he was even sued by his own bank. At around this time, Alex's mother declared bankruptcy as well. Abby, having had her fill of all of this, started making plans to sell the apartment she had bought for the family. Although she had paid for it, it was registered under Cao's name, which complicated things. They had originally went through this arrangement to avoid paying additional taxes, but now it was coming back to bite her. Cao did not want to move and staunchly opposed her decision to sell the place. At one point, he even threatened to violently end her life if she did. Abby was scared and sought some legal help to sort out this whole ordeal. But even despite all of this, she still planned on buying the family a new, albeit cheaper, home with some of the earnings from the sale. That wasn't quite enough for Alex's family, though. These financial rearrangements angered them greatly. They were so angry, in fact, that they started to mull around the idea of actually going through with killing her. Soon enough, they were outright plotting her murder. It was at this point that Cao Kuang rented out an apartment a few miles away specifically to do the deed. On February 21st of 2023, Abby Choi never showed up to pick her daughter up from school like she normally did. It was reported that she was last seen entering into the car in which she normally rode, driven by her brother, Anthony. Not only was this weird enough, her social media had gone completely inactive, something very strange for someone who made a career as an influencer. Given her wealth, fame, and influence, the local police panicked and sent over 150 officers to deal with the case. It wasn't too long before the police were able to find some CCTV footage that showed that her usual car, Anthony's car, had been the one to pick her up. GPS data from her phone showed that the phone had ended up over 20 miles away in a small Taipo village. Some of the officers on the case drove out to the area and started interviewing the locals. They checked security camera footage from the area along with dashcam footage from local drivers. After all of their research, the police ended up at the ground floor of a 3-story house. It was now February 24th of 2023, 3 days after Abby had suddenly vanished. This was when the police made a grisly discovery within that house. There they found the headless body of Abby Choi, or at least they found most of it. The ground floor of the house had been rented out and turned into what was essentially a butcher's shop. It was equipped with all manner of horrific tools for the job, such as an electric saw, a meat grinder, a hammer, and chopping utensils. The apartment was unfurnished, completely covered in plastic. The police also found face shields, raincoats, and protective outerwear to keep the killers themselves from getting covered in blood. Abby's purse, ID, and credit card were discovered lying around. Then they found, in the refrigerator, a long, slender pair of human legs. Underneath, they found various other body parts, some of which had already been cooked. It was not difficult for the police to deduce that this had been a homicide, and it didn't take too long for them to find out that Cao Kuang had been the man who had rented this place out. Their suspicions were already high, as both Alex and Cal had given conflicting, misleading statements as to where Abby was leading up to her disappearance. With what they found, they had no doubt that at least one member of Alex's family had been behind this. Little did they know at the time, it was all of them. When the details of the crime came out, all of Hong Kong was left feeling very shaken. After all, Hong Kong is often listed as one of the safest cities on Earth. The violent crime rates are usually extremely low, with cases of this magnitude being virtually unheard of. The public and the police wanted to know why this had happened. It was only one day before the police arrested their first 3 suspects. The first was Alex's brother, Anthony Kwong, Abby's driver. The other 2 were Alex's parents. Alex himself, though, was nowhere to be found. One of Abby's good friends offered up a $127,000 reward for Alex's capture. After a huge manhunt took place, the police finally tracked Alex down, just in the nick of time. Alex was attempting to stow away on a small boat with roughly $64,000 in cash and about $500,000 worth of jewelry and watches. He had already bribed a man to board the boat, and he had nearly gotten away when the police caught him. The next day, on the 26th, the police had finally found Abby's head, which was now nothing but a skull and some hair, along with some of her ribs inside a pot of cooked soup. DNA testing later proved that these did indeed belong to Abby. Unfortunately, this still wasn't her entire body in the end. The police had no idea where the other pieces might be. Her hands, torso, and various other parts were still missing. More than 100 officers were enlisted to help look for them all over the city. The police came to believe that the entire killing had been masterminded by none other than Abby's former father-in-law, Cao Kwong. They believed that she was originally attacked in the car that Anthony used to drive her around. The 7-seat van was found with blood spatter in the back, and Abby's skull was found to have a large hole in the back right side. Pathologists believed that she was struck with something that likely ended her life then and there. Shortly after, the police went on to arrest one more suspect in connection to the crime. This wasn't a member of Alex's family. It was actually Cao's mistress at the time, a 47-year-old woman named Ng Chi Wing. She had assisted Cao in renting the apartment where the body was found and with renting a second apartment to hide Alex. One of the suspects had been caught on CCTV footage moving some trash bags to a trash facility. It was believed that this was where the rest of Abby's body had likely ended up. Officers searched the local sewer system, a cemetery that Alex and his father had recently just visited, and a landfill in the northeast part of the city. They continued to question the locals in the area, hoping to find any sort of information that might help them tie up some loose ends in the case. On February 27th, the police went on to slap Alex Kwong, his brother Anthony, and his father Cao with charges of murder. As the law goes in Hong Kong, a conviction on charges of murder carries a mandatory life sentence. They then hit Alex's mother, Jenny, with a charge of perverting the course of justice. It's unknown how hands-on involved she was with the murder, but it's safe to say she was a part of it in one way or another. All 4 members of the family were to be denied bail and held as the investigation continued. Cao's mistress, Ng, was charged with abetting a murder suspect. She, though, was given bail and now roams free. Alex's various incidents of theft that occurred over the last 10 years started coming to light as well. He was also wanted for jumping bail back in 2015, a case related to his dating app schemes. The police, wanting to make sure Alex saw as much time as humanly possible, hit him with charges related to these cases as well. On March 2nd, a 6th suspect came to light. This was a 41-year-old man named Lam Shun. Shun was arrested when it was thought that he had assisted in helping Alex to escape Hong Kong. Lam was an employee of a local yacht rental company who set Alex up with a way to stow away on the boat. Lam was granted bail. Then yet another suspect was brought in. This was a 29-year-old woman named Irene Poon Hao Ying, a friend of Alex who had also helped him in attempting to flee the country. She was caught in Shenzhen, China, and handed over to the Hong Kong police. She was granted bail as well, but she was slapped with a travel ban that would prevent her from leaving the country again. Given that Abby never did formally finalize her marriage to Chris Tam, her assets would go on to be distributed amongst her kids by default. However, since they were all under the age of 18, her children's closest of age next of kin could apply to be their trustees and keep assets on behalf of the kids. It was a complicated situation. Abby's mother filed a court injunction that would forbid Cal from selling the apartment that Abby had purchased for him, seeking some sort of paperwork that would list her as the sole owner of the home. Under city law, one can't benefit from their own illegal wrongdoing, so Cal wasn't going to get anything regardless. On May 8th of 2023, a pretrial conference was held in relation to the case, in which 6 of the 7 suspects appeared in court. The police were able to show over 30 items of evidence, including some knives, hammers, and even chainsaws. They also demonstrated the bloodstains that were found within the interior of the van. On June 18th, hundreds came out to attend Abby's funeral almost 4 months after her body was first discovered. Friends, family, and even celebrities from all walks of life came out to leave flowers and pay their respects. While funerals in Hong Kong are traditionally fairly monochromatic, Abby's funeral was presented in her favorite color, pink. The funeral took place in a quiet suburb of Hong Kong. The entrance was adorned with pink curtains and 2 large images of Abby on either side. Her husband, Chris, showed up to the ceremony with their children. He vowed to look after all 4 of the kids, even going as far as adopting Abby's 2 children from her marriage with Alex. Abby was cremated and taken to a monastery on a nearby island. Unfortunately, the rest of her body was never found despite the extensive search. Abby's friends have said that, although she is gone, they were thankful to have her in their lives in the first place, with one friend saying, "When Abby was alive, she was a very kind person and always wanted to help people. I feel anyone who had a chance to be her family or her friend are blessed." It will be at least 4 to 5 years before any of Abby's children can inherit her estate. They will need to wait for the conclusion of her murder case, which, if anyone appeals, may take years and years. Alex, Cal, and Anthony still remain in custody on the murder charges. Alex's mother, Jenny, is still in custody as well. She has tried and failed to secure bail twice now. Pre-trial restrictions on reporting have been put into place, meaning that we likely won't hear anything new about the case for quite some time now. At this point in time, it's unknown when the trial will take place. Once again, thank you for watching my video. This is definitely a brutal one, and a lot of people have asked that I cover it over the past several months. When a case like this is fairly new, I want to wait at least a little while to feel things out and get all the information I can. Given that it's going to be a while before the trial, I feel like this is probably all we'll know for a long time now. If you found the topic interesting, please give me a like, it helps out in the algorithm, and subscribe if you want to see more videos like this. Follow me on social media if you want, I always appreciate that. I also have some fan art here drawn by Slovakians on Instagram. It's pretty great, be sure to give the account a look. And if you want to support the channel even further, I do have a Patreon account which I always keep linked down in the description below, and speaking of which, shout out to the top patrons. We've got Royal Pain in Ass, Kylie Jeffers, Tracy Farrell, Jada, Dana Hart, Anna B, Sunrider, Gabrielle Tansik, Lee aka Crust, Emilia Morales, George Lopez, Minnie Tina, Ron Murillo, Travis Billings, Lettuce, Jason Whitehurst, Lord Fool, Jim Dowell, Kimmy Leffel, Melina Lee Williams-Haas, Rebecca Padilla, Lisa Helmbrecht, Impalato, Stephen Jamie Kramer, Max Sword Guy, Pao Yang, April Diamond, Starfade, Astral, Angie, Rick of Work in Progress USA, Sass Johnson, Buttery Frankus, Jules Latona, Arctic Cat, Adrian Lawley, Marsh, Rinsenstein, Kim Peak, Lex Luthor, Lux Alpaca, CSD, Scoochie Main, Jackie, and Mark Barnett. You all have contributed to my survival. This has been your host Kyle, thank you, and good night.